Welcome everyone to our fifth session of the season. In continuing with the theme that we have uh, in running a startup, in particularly say startup, we've gone from a product metrics and now we're talking about fundraising. Our session today is with Stephany. Stephany is going to be talking about her personal journey of fundraising, which is pre-seed, seed, and Series A. How did she go about it? What are the challenges that you face? And most importantly, what are the things which investors look at? We always look at our startup from our own perspective, and also we look at it from a customer's perspective. However, investors are not founders, investors are not customers most of the time. They don't understand your business, they don't understand the market as much as you do. So what do they really look at? What do they really value? And what do they not value? These are some of the things which come not from the blogs that you read, comes from the experience of having raised multiple rounds of funds, and which is the reason why I'm sure I'm going to be taking a lot of understanding and knowledge and insights from today's session. But before we do that, what is TIE? I'm sure some of you have been in this for earlier events, and it would be repetitive, but it's worth talking about it because it is important. The reason why we exist is for you. It's for the entrepreneurs. Either you already are or you are looking at being one. TIE supports entrepreneurs in various different ways: education, networking, mentoring, and investing. What we're really doing here is education format. There are multiple different formats that you would experience as you go along. TIE is run by entrepreneurs and professionals who volunteer their time and money along with the sponsors to support the chapter to put together programs like this. My name is Kanchan Kumar. I'm a startup founder myself. I take out my time to run the chapter and to volunteer my time because I am passionate about it. You could be associated with TIE by becoming an associate member. It's open to everyone. Anyone who believes in entrepreneurship is an entrepreneur or aspiring to be one. And then we have another set of members that are called charter members. Charter members are by invitation, and this is typically offered to seasoned entrepreneurs, professional investors who are not only willing to learn, but also willing to support entrepreneurs. We do various kinds of programs. One of the programs, this season we have been focused on the early stage startup journey. We started by doing a priority mapping by Mike Ho. We spoke about, we spoke to Alex Baker from Relay about changing how the investing lens is changing. We had a workshop with Mark Evans where he spoke about storytelling, and a very interesting one with Philip Gates last week, which was startup metrics. What are the metrics that you should care about? If you've missed these sessions, you can always go to our YouTube channel on TIE Toronto and find the recordings of these sessions. The current one is with Steph. The next one is extremely important. If you're an early stage entrepreneur, I would certainly want you to attend the next one, which is on TIE Quest. This is our flagship program, which recognizes early stage entrepreneurs, supports them in over a period of time, and then finds the gem among them. And we'll be showcasing some of those gems as well. Without further ado, Steph, please go ahead. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. Let me just pull up my presentation. Hopefully this works. Okay, 2 seconds. We were all set up before this.
Murphy is seldom wrong.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, well, hopefully, there's some insight. I think once you go through a few rounds of fundraise, some of it you in some ways want to forget. Because as you know, and it sounds like everyone here is an entrepreneur, it's not an easy journey. And so, oh, this is not working the way I want. Oh, is this okay, you think?
You could possibly do a present. Aren't you able to?
Is better?
Yeah, this should work. Yeah.
Okay. Enter full screen. Let's try this. No. Okay. Well, it's not gonna want to collaborate right now for whatever reason. Okay. So just about myself. So this is me. I'm Stephany Lapierre. I'm the founder and CEO of Tealbook, and I'll go into Tealbook a little bit after. So just giving you um, a bit of snapshot. So this is not my first company. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career. I do invest small checks in some companies, mostly related to data and supply chain. And I do mentor women founders. So if there are some women founders in the audience, I try to give back, mostly because people have been so generous with their time with me. I have been nominated 100 most influential women in supply chain, which means a lot in our space, being so focused in solving supply chain data. I sit on several boards. Most of them are related to my industry, really positioning myself as a thought leader in the space. And our platform has been nominated or has won Gartner Cool Vendor, 50 Vendors to Watch by Spend Matters, and has been most known in Canada's CIX Top 20 a few years back. So this is my profile. And as I've became sort of grown up in my fundraising journey, started to be, still keeping that humility, but it's really important to put yourself out there because you are competing with so many other people in the industry. So how you are perceived by investors to be someone that comes from the space that is very well established and recognized can be incredibly important. But this is here what investors have seen from the beginning. They saw at the beginning when I was raising and it was just me and an idea, they saw a sole founder, which is there's a lot of risk. If something happens to me or my kids end up getting sick, there's a lot at risk. If they're putting capital in my company, everything relies on me. And so that was a risk. I was a first-time founder of a tech company. So I built a consulting firm before, grew it organically, but I was not known to the investment community or the tech community. And it takes so much resilience to be able to go through this journey that as an investor, they see this as a risk because you haven't done it before and you don't really quite know what you're getting yourself into, which can be a blessing. For first time fundraising. So again, it comes back to learning how to tell a story and learning how to fundraise and focusing on the right type of investors. So probably a lot of learnings throughout that process, but from an investor perspective, you may not be coming across as polished or not be as direct or not selling your story big enough. And so that could be perceived as maybe it's not the right opportunity or you're not the right type of founder. I am a woman, clearly. I hate to say it, but only 2 to 3% of venture capital go into female founded companies. So the stats are unfortunately really bad. I think there's an education to be done on both sides. I do believe that women need to be aware of this so that when they are pitching to investors, they need to adapt. And investors also need to adapt that we have a different style and we do talk differently and we answer questions differently. And so hopefully more female tech founders are building massive companies and we can inspire other women to be very successful and it won't be a problem in the future, but today it's still something to overcome. And in the earlier days, I had an investor saying, you're cute. Investors will want to see you because they don't see women very often, but they won't write you a check. And so learning, the hard way of hearing it firsthand from investors, but also looking at the statistics. Now, the other good news is that there's a ton that's been done to help female founders in the last 5 years. There's amazing funds. We are a portfolio company of Stand Up Ventures with Michelle McBain. It's a Canadian fund fully dedicated to women founders. And I'm also part of the BDC Women in Tech Fund, which is again, I think it was $100 or $200 million dedicated to female founders. And they've made quite a lot of investment with really impressive companies. I am French Canadian, so I'm from Quebec and I learned English when I was 18. So definitely have worked on my skills, but having an accent is foreign. And investors recognize that as potentially being not something that they can trust if they see that your English is not perfect or you have an accent. I do have 3 young kids. I've got my oldest now is 13, my youngest is 7. But when I started Tealbook, they were quite younger, and that could be another risk. How can you build a company and raise children? And then being Canadian, luckily, this is not so much an handicap anymore. Canada has been, especially Toronto, has attracted all kinds of venture capital from the US who are recognizing that our technology is really best in class. And there's amazing companies here. But 5 years ago, when I started fundraising, a lot of funds in the US would say, like, I don't invest, I'm not comfortable investing in Canada. I've never invested. What are the, and it's another barrier, especially if you're raising in the US. And the other side is, we're building a big idea and a big company. And we have seen that Canadian VCs tend to be a little bit less risk taking. So wants to see more proof, they write smaller check size, they give smaller valuation. And just in our last round, we turned down 2 term sheets from Canada that were half of the valuation that we ended up getting for a Series A. And then just, in terms of having such a big idea, even now that we're getting success and we're raising more capital and we're getting a lot of media attention, VCs are saying, like, now I get it, right? But when you started, we had no idea what you were talking about. And so, trying to explain and learn how to communicate something that's really big and drill it down to investors that don't really know your space or understand it, or maybe reading what's out there. But if you're changing a mindset and you're building a new category, that can be really uncomfortable. And so I think it's what's the message here is, you believe in yourself, you've got conviction, you have an idea that you feel very passionate about. I think it's very important that when you walk into a meeting with an investor, that you're putting yourself in their shoes and you're able to be aware of what they see in you. And, there's a lot of different things that I had to do over time to overcome some of this. But the most important, if you have growth and you get customers, that is a very, very easy way to overcome that. And the other way is building trust. And so building trust with the community, being involved, being known by other founders, being known by the investment community. And that takes time, it takes investment. I can imagine now with COVID, it would be quite challenging. I was physically at a lot of different investor events and getting to meet the investment community. And so a little bit about my company. What we do is we aggregate data across 400 million different sources, and we create a universal supplier profile for every B2B company in the world. And we are feeding that universal supplier profile into any buy-side digital enterprise solution. And so our customers are typically quite large. They do business with tens to hundreds of thousands of suppliers globally. And today they don't have a really easy way to be able to have a view of who they do business with. And the more systems that they have, the more disparity it creates. And they lose a lot of visibility in order to optimize their entire supplier base. And so the only way that they've been able to overcome this today is by buying services, having some pretty heavy system integration between those systems that they've bought, supplement with market intelligence, with IT resources, with people, and a really high dependency for suppliers to come to portals to update their information. And so we've been able to build something that out of the box, they're able to plug into their vendor master. We improve completeness and accuracy of their record by over 80% across 100% of their suppliers. And then we expand also the footprint of their suppliers so that we can give them a network, which has proven in COVID days to be incredibly valuable, to be able to find suppliers to ensure business continuity, shift their production, identify PPEs. With Black Lives Matter, a lot of our clients want to know which suppliers are small and diverse, how to find more small and diverse suppliers, and that could they could start generating opportunities for, and so on and so forth. So a lot of different applications. When our clients plug in Tealbook, it becomes their single source of truth, and it gives them a more interchangeable, flexible technology stack with visibility to fully optimize their supplier base. And so again, a really big idea, because when I started, I did not know about machine learning or AI, and a lot of education needed to happen to our market on how we were using technology, how we were able to create the self-enriched data set, and how they could capitalize on it. And our market luckily has changed quite a bit. our customers are facing some pretty big failures and implementation of their systems. And they bought software hoping that it was going to fix their data. And unfortunately, it hasn't. And it's really impacted their digital transformation. So a lot of trends with COVID. We grew our pipeline 600%. Our revenue's been doubling quarter over quarter. So COVID for us was a huge accelerator, especially. I'm sure you've seen a lot of headlines in supply chain. About the company itself is one thing. And when I talk to customers, of course, I have to pitch the company, what we do. And when they get interested, they will start diving into how and what's your business model, what's your pricing, can you give me some use cases, and so on and so forth. When you get into diligence, they go really deep into your technology and contact your customers to understand how they're using it. But what's most important is being able to identify why they would invest in your company. And something that a founder early on had talked to me about is building an investment thesis for your company that you could use when you're fundraising. And I've heard that investors have gotten a plane and flew out of San Francisco or New York to meet a company just by looking at their growth numbers. Or if they understand the investment thesis, they're going to start to contact you. And for us, it was very true in August, where every VC in Silicon Valley was contacting us because they were hearing that obviously supply chain data was, incredibly valuable. Companies were failing and not being able to really, optimize and be able to respond to market changes or the demands of the business fast enough. So suddenly, data and all of the lights of COVID became incredibly important. And so our investment thesis, just to give you a sense of how I've built this, this is from our Series A. The huge fact lies that eProcurement software market, so the cloud-based solution, will fix supplier data. So Gartner claims that 75% of IT procurement project will fail due to poor data quality, and that millions of dollars are being poured into the source to pay, procure to pay system, and the compliance is at an all-time low. DNB published, so we're very similar to DNB in terms of some of the use cases that we saw for. They came out with their IPO talking about market intelligence being forecasted to grow by $32 billion over the next 3 years. And if you combine that with a very fast procurement software market that's going to reach $20 billion, we're talking about a pretty big market that we are attaching ourselves that's growing really fast. And that's very, very important. And some of our last seed round, our investors said, one of the most important things is, do you have a market you can attach to that grows really fast that you can grow with? Supply chain failed during COVID, which accelerated the need for supply chain visibility, resiliency, and agility. And eProcurement software and system integrators were really desperate to provide a solution to their customers that were paralyzed when a big global crisis happened like this. Because when you have time to do your digital transformation, things are not necessarily prioritized in the right way, or you get time to build the investment thesis to get budget for certain things. And suddenly data became so critical, and the companies that were selling, the fact that they could solve for data couldn't respond. And so we grew our pipeline of partners very rapidly, and we're now announcing partnership where they're distributing our data through their platform, which is a great use case for us to generate more revenue, get more distribution, improve our data faster, et cetera. And then lastly, big IPO in our space and companies that we feel very close to. So finding that analogy, don't start with analogy that we're the LinkedIn of or the Zoom info, but it's always good when you're pitching to be able to include something that investors go, oh, I understand. And for us, that's been true for Zoom info. So when we talk about the sell side of having, all the companies moving to Salesforce, they bought cloud-based CRM solution as a way to workflow the data and have more visibility, but it didn't come with built-in amazing data. It had to be service, or people had to continuously update their record and contact information. And suddenly you have the Zoom info that suddenly they are integrating into Salesforce to make the data more amazing because they're proactively grabbing contact information and enriching the data without relying on people or services. So that analogy, although it's not totally apple to apple, you could see that, hey, a decade later, the buy side is flocking to cloud-based source to pay or procure to pay solution with portals. It's not making the data amazing. There's a lot of failure, and that's why Tealbook has a very similar business case. Now, we're very lucky that just a few months after the last raise that ZoomInfo went public and had a very quick market cap of $16 billion. And we have a very similar story to Snowflake. If you read the Snowflake website, it's very similar in terms of how we position ourselves today as the supplier data foundation that powers the buy-side digital enterprise. And so looking at something like Snowflake at a $70 billion market cap, suddenly you get the green light from investors like, okay, this is a very exciting space. This has nothing to do with our company, but it's the investment thesis as to why you should be looking at this space. And every investor that you're going to pitch to that's institutional will need to build that investment thesis for their team. So they're going to need to build, even if there are, a general partner, they still need to build, and they'll have analysts that will provide the document that will have all the information, and then they need to present that to their team. And depending on the process, which is always good to understand, they're going to need to all buy into that thesis. So super important to have control of that narrative and know what it is. And please, as we go, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. I won't take the whole hour to go through the slides, and we'll spend some time going through your questions. So don't be shy. So a little bit about our funding history. I started the company bootstrapped initially. I had a different model. I was selling subscription or membership to suppliers, a business model that we don't use anymore, but at the time it helped me generate revenue that I could reinvest into the technology. And I was able to make over $1 million in ARR by myself in the early days. But that model was not scalable. And so we had to pivot. At the time, I was able to raise with an angel investor $1 million. So she had given me $850 for ventures and $150 in debt. That's because I was trying to not dilute as much. So that's how we constructed the deal. In hindsight, the valuation was probably too high. If we both, her and I, had known better, I would have probably had a lower valuation. She would probably got more of my company, but we just didn't know better. And at the time we had revenue, and so we're in a different position. But putting a higher valuation, we had to then grow into a valuation, which is always a little tricky. We did spend the angel money more on the MVP. So we were building out the initial product. I was the only person selling. I ended up selling to 6 enterprise customers, including Biogen, which is a $60 billion market cap company. And suddenly we were running out of money, and now we had all this proof of concept. And so I went to market to raise capital and met hundreds of investors. And so we were getting pretty close to hitting a wall. And I knew that if I didn't have money, there's no way that I could continue on. And we need to pivot this model in a way that we could scale the business and eventually monetize. And so at the time, I met so many investors, and I think my naivety in some ways is that I didn't know how to filter investors. And so I was contacting basically just anyone that had an investor title in their LinkedIn profile or were connected, or any VCs. And suddenly I'm meeting with VCs that are not on my appropriate stage. And most of them will meet you because they don't want to miss out when you get to a certain stage, but understanding which are the funds in your space, what stage they invest into, what check size, where they're at in their funds, who's making the decision, what's their process is so important. And I just didn't know this. And so I just went full force, went to raise capital. And it was one investor at some point that looked at me and said, like, who are you? Like, Lone Ranger there. And so the things that were the biggest handicap at that point is that the technology was outsourced out of a team in Montreal. I had no team. I had just the consultants that work with me. And that was just not going to work. Investors were not going to give me money if I didn't have these things secure. And so, I left this meeting quite defeated. I was like, well, I can't hire a team if I don't have the capital. And what he said to me is like, you're not going to be able to get capital if you don't hire the team. And so I'm leaving this meeting like, how am I going to survive this? And then I just did. I just started meeting. At the time, I identified if I had a COO and a CTO that had built tech companies before that could bring the technology in-house, that's really what investors were telling me. Now, he was forthcoming enough to tell me the truth. And that's something that none of the other investors had done. So even though it hurt, it was like, what? And it just was the right thing. And I had to listen. And if I didn't listen, I would have hit the wall. And so in this case, I was able to go out to market, and I found a CTO and a COO. My CTO, very fortunate that he had worked at Google, worked at a rebiner space, had a second master's in computer sciences at UFT, with the focus in machine learning, big data, usability, search engine. So he had all the perfect ingredients for me as a non-tech founder to come in and bring my vision to life. And so that was a gift. And at that point, we were able to secure seed round. IEF was the first investor that came in and led the round, and a few other micro funds came in to complete the round. And so that happened in 2017. We used the capital to rebuild Tealbook, machine learning enable on Google, and then start seeding the data ourselves. And so that was a big change, and that's what makes us truly competitive today and gives us such a leg up on the market. And then we came to a place where we hadn't yet figured out how to sell it, to monetize it fast enough. So we had a little bit of revenue, but not enough. And we had to put so much in our R&D and the engineering team and our data team. And so we went to market with the traction to get a bridge round that was spiraled with BDC, IF, Stand Up, and others. And then the big pivot for us was last year, where once you have so much data, we got a little bit distracted building applications on top of our data platform, because we felt our clients wanted to buy something tangible that could solve for a use case, but we became very confusing to the market. The market saw us as a supplier discovery engine, saw us as a supplier diversity solution, saw us as vendor management solution, as knowledge management solution, as supplier relationship management. Meanwhile, those were just all outcome of building so much data. And we looked a bit like a shiny object here, when our clients who would spend millions of dollars believing that these software solution were going to solve their data problem, and we're failing. And it's one of now my executive, who's he's actually being promoted as Chief Strategy Officer, that contacted me coming from the industry and said, if you're building what I think you're building, which is a self-enriching, self-maintaining data set, and not what I'm reading on your website, which is you sound like a software company, you're sitting on a gold mine. You just need to shift to be able to help your customers capitalize on their investment, and then be able to salvage basically their digital transformation. And that was the shift that we needed. But again, it's all about listening to opportunities, and how can you sell something that you can get the type of scale that we needed to be successful. And as soon as we did that, it felt like G-force from the market. Analysts were paying attention, thought leaders were really believing in getting behind our vision. We were closing deals faster, and then we attract new capital. New VCs came in and our seed round, and then Workday Ventures also participated, which was a big validation in our market. And then since then, I'm sorry, I'm kind of making a long story. Hopefully some of this is relatable to your journey. But when we closed that round, we had a really good sense of where we were going to put our money to be able to shift and cement our position and also invest. But we still had a lot of things to validate. And so the reason we didn't call a $5 million round, because we combined the bridge with the C2, is really to the fact that we still had a lot of validation to be able to go to Series A with a lot of confidence on where we're going to use a bigger check size and where we're going to get the most outcome. We just didn't feel that level of confidence. There's a lot of things that we needed to polish. And so we use this as a seed to give us another year to a year and a half to refine our go-to-market strategy, validate our pricing models, and see the adoption from our clients. And so that's really what we did. And then that shift, we started rebuilding sales, marketing, start implementing Salesforce so we get the data, Pardot for marketing, all the things that we really needed as a foundation so that we could scale, and then proving out our pricing that we had shifted. And then COVID hit, and then that accelerated everything for us. And so even though we were not anticipating to go to Series A until Q2 2021, we got so much inbound interest from investors. We got, a lot of traction from the market, partnerships that were being signed, doubling our revenue quarter over quarter. And so we decided to go to market. And just to show you sort of the struggle of the beginning, we launched a process at the end of the first week in October, and it was 4 weeks to getting a signed term sheet. And a lot of interest from VCs. We have 15 investors that would like to participate that we don't have room for. So pretty amazing outcome. Again, I'm saying this, I'm very humbled by this, because at the beginning I was begging investors to give us money. And once you start seeing growth and validating, it's incredible. What people tell you is that, one, you can be selective. We did turn down term sheets. And you can also, you can choose more your terms. We're not diluting more than we wanted to. And then we get to choose the partner that we feel has the most conviction in our thesis and is going to add value. So again, please, if you have questions, put in the chat room so we can address them. So a couple of things to think about when you're fundraising. I think it's the question, do you really need capital, right? Is there a way for you to bootstrap your business as far as possible? Because the more proof points you have, the better the valuation, the more you're going to be able to raise capital, the less compromise you're going to have to make on the investors in the early days. And I feel really fortunate that all of my investors are pretty amazing and supportive, but I've heard some horror stories. And sometimes it's just that you have to do what you have to do. And if you're stuck needing money, then you're kind of bird in hand. You're at the mercy of investors, and investors generally are looking for a good deal. They're looking to put their capital to work to get the best return. Then the other piece is that, what will you use the capital for? Like, do you really know where you're going to put the money, and where are you going to put the money that you're going to get the most return in terms of outcome, so that, you're getting to the next really important milestone in your business. And then, are you ready to take on capital? And so I guess that goes hand in hand with how you will use the capital, but are you really ready? Like, do you have the right team? Do you know who you're going to be hiring? How you're going to investing, and making sure that you really prioritize where that capital goes to. And I've seen so many companies, having fancy offices because they think what's important is to attract people, and people will really care about a fancy office. It's not the best use of proceeds. So kind of really thinking, where do I put my money where I'm going to get the most value so I can get to the next milestone as fast as possible. So a couple of stages, this is just my sort of, kind of thinking back to what I look like versus like at the time to versus what I look now. So this, obviously there's a big variation. Some people raise capital and they call it Series A way faster. So just know that your journey is your journey, and no one knows your journey better than you do. And so hopefully by talking about my experience, you're getting some nuggets out of it. And if you get one nugget out of today, to me, it's always a good use of my time. And so when I look at the angel stage, what I look like at the time is that I had an MVP. So I did have, because I bootstrap in the early days, but most in the angel round may not even have a product, or maybe have something that's quasi demoable. You may have little to no revenue. You have a strong investment thesis. If you don't, then there's no business, but you have to show that there's a fast growing market and there's a really big problem that you're solving for, and you understand the problem you're solving for. I've also seen a lot of companies raising capital that have a good idea, but they don't really know the space. And so it makes it very difficult to building the best product that solves a real problem for that type of customer, unless you really know. And if you haven't yet come up with an idea and you're just here because you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, I'd say just watch for all the inefficient things that you may be doing at work that are, repetitive and tactical. Those are usually where the best inspiration come for businesses. And then, do you have access to customers? You may have a few customers, or where the customers are. So that's what I would be looking for as an angel investors, is like, who are your clients? How are you going to go after them? Even if they're very early adopters, like, who are your early customer types, and how are you going to get them excited about your product? And when I think about seed and what I look like at seed, I did need a team. So if there's sole founders here, I encourage you to get a team, hire smart people as soon as you can. If you're thinking about being a sole founder, I would suggest don't do that. Get a partner. It's very lonely. It's very hard to build a company on your own in the beginning. Now I have an amazing executive team. It's completely transformed me, but it took some time to get there, and very trying. You need to build like some massive thick skin and be incredibly resilient. And it's hard for any founder, that you have partners or not, but as a single founder, that's just super hard. So focus on the team, bring smart people. I did tend to hire people at the beginning that just were, could work, didn't do as much diligence, and I paid for that. It's hard to undo when you're not hiring the best talent. And so focus on hiring smart people, even if you have to pay a little bit more in equity or salary. It goes a very, very long way to have people that are hungry, that believe in that they're passionate about what you're solving for, and that bring a skill set that complements you. Like, I didn't have a technical background. I did not scale a tech company. I did not build a go-to-market and execute on it in a tech environment or enterprise software. And so those are all like how I'm picking my CFO and now my VP of finance, all bring skill set that I just don't have. And it makes my job incredibly easy. You need some early proof of market fit. So people have adopted your product or trying it. They're saying really nice things about it. Even though there's maybe things to improve, there's a lot of positive energy around what you're building. And then you can obviously demo or have customers already in their product. And then I'd say the value, like what are they getting? What's real ROI that they're gaining out of using this? And I maybe more swayed towards the enterprise. So if it's not as applicable, if you're in the consumer side or in different markets, I'm sorry. But for us, it was about customer and the value that they're extracting from it, and then seeing growth. So again, it really depends how you define it, but be able to talk about growth and how that growth progressed quarter over quarter. And the sooner you become disciplined about thinking about quarterly objectives, we use OKRs at Tealbook, and then you can actually every board meeting or every executive meeting or investor catch up, you're able to put up the slides of seeing the progress from quarter over quarter. And at Series A, we look very different. And I've been frustrated through the process of like, we've got customers, we've got a great team, we've got product market fit, and then still investors like, I want to see more. And that happens a lot. And so don't get discouraged. I think it's important to understand what they're looking for, but they always want to, even though they're ventures, a lot of them are risk averse. And so the more you can mitigate that risk, or maybe you haven't convinced them. And if you haven't convinced them yet, they want to see proof point from the market. So they want you to be a little further along or have more validation. But at Series A, we had a very strong and well-balanced team. Again, my executive team is like absolutely insane. So we had that. We had product market fit. So you can feel it. You can actually physically feel it when you're looking at the market, when you're talking to customers with thought leader. Tealbook came out in the A.T. Kearney slide about, I think the first week we were raising capital as the only logo as part of the spider graph of all these other procurement solutions in the market. And we were in the middle, the only logo as the data foundation to this entire market. So obviously having some kind of validation point like this hugely helped during our fundraise, because we could show, hey, it's one thing that we're saying this, but A.T. Kearney, who's one of the most prestigious consulting firm in our space, was as put us in the middle of that ecosystem. We had a fast growing market. So again, in our space, it's business intelligence, it's data, it's procurement, it's supply chain. So we're able to show through the investment thesis that we showed that we could show everything was starting to be repeatable. So we could do an event, we could get leads, we could convert those leads, we could start generating revenue, close deals with a certain amount of time, with a certain amount of a strategy. And so as soon as you make things repeatable, that you landed some massive accounts, like we landed Johnson & Johnson in the early days, like everyone should be flocking to say like, hey, you sold Johnson & Johnson, one of the top companies in the world, but it was not enough, because even if you land one big client, it's not repeatable. So what's repeatable? An investor would prefer you closing 100 smaller accounts, so that if they put more money, you can close 1,000. Because if you land one big account, it could have just been luck, or you could have met that one customer and convinced them. So you need to have repetitivity in your business. And the other piece is defensibility. Like they're very focused on what makes you defensible. I'm going to invest in the company that's going to win. What tells me that you're going to win? So if you have a crowded space, or if there's companies that smell and look like you in the market, you need to come with your battle cards and really show them, why you're different. And we've done chart, we developed an overview in our data room that gave them all of the information. We build the investment thesis for them. We give them the competitive landscape, how we differentiate. We give them all the metrics, and it was wrapped up with a bow. Our data room looked more like a Series C round than a Series A, but we did that on purpose because we want to instill trust, show that we were transparent, and give the opportunity for the GP, the general partner at the fund, to build the investment thesis pretty quickly, because we knew we were gonna close, get a term sheet pretty quickly. And then the other piece that you need to know is that if your business is repeatable, you have a really good sense of if you put $1 here, how that's going to convert into revenue. And so we're still trying to figure this out. And what we said is we raised 2 quarters ahead of what we were supposed to raise. So we're still figuring things out, but we really have 2 quarters now in front of us where we have to refine that predictability. And so a big focus for us has become incredibly predictable, because if you can show predictability and you can put numbers that you're going to hit next quarter or next year, when you raise preemptively, there's a really good chance that they're going to give you credit for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months of ARR, which could mean hundreds of millions of dollars in difference in value. And so one company that's pretty successful in our space that's sold to Workday is called Scout RFP. Now, when you look at the valuation, they closed, it was apparently a 25 multiple, which is massive for a software company in our space. But really what Scout did is that they put a number for every stage, every year they hit it. So when they got in a position to get acquired, like, we're not going to sell today because we know we're going to double our revenue next year. We're going to be worth this next year. And if someone's really, excited about your business and want to acquire you, they will give you that credit. So really their multiple was not 25, but they were able to convince that they're going to hit that the following year. And then I want to be mindful of time, so I want to give us time for questions, but just one of the things that's really important to define is growth. So again, whatever growth that means, define it really early. If it's not revenue, what is it that you can show to the investors over and over again? And that will also become the guiding light for your team. Like, what is growth? And let's find those metrics, let's define them. Let's build our OKRs around that and make sure that we are really focused on that. And that may take time. It took time for us. Even sometimes we have a split personality between data, and we do have an application. And so our clients want us to be a software company, but we're really a data platform, and trying to always keep the team aligned on that. And what growth doesn't mean engagement for us. It actually means the adoption of our data and how it's pulled into the system. But it can be a little bit confusing if you see us as a software company. So I think defining that yourself and as a team is very important. And then what makes you different? It's whatever the investors are going to see that they're going to trust. And so, is the market and customers talking about you? Like, have you made enough noise in the market that you're being recognized, and people can say that there's a new upcoming, even if you're a tiny company, are you being recognized by customers in the market? Do investors and founders talk about you? Like, the best channel for leads for investors is other founders. If I give a recommendation to one of my investors will take the call. And especially if I made money for my investors, like, if I can find someone else like me, they'll want to know that other founder. So that's your founder network is super important. Are you showing growth? I know I'm repeating myself, but I can't tell you how important that is. Are the analysts pointing at you? So very early on, before we even really had revenue, we were named the cool vendor list by Gartner. So it's recognition. We were at CIX top 20 before we hit $1 million in revenue. And so it's having sort of people and analysts pointing at you to be the next best thing, especially if you're building in a new category. Do customers really want what you have? Are they, like, when you talk to them about the problem you're solving, they're like, yes. And you should be very honest with yourself. Even if you're building something different, like, you can see how excited people get around your product. If you don't have that, just go back and reiterate, but you need to find that. Otherwise, you're going to stall. You may convince a few people at the beginning, but it's not going to scale. And then, do people want to work for you? The one thing that when we interview, and we have been able to successfully, knock on wood, hire pretty much any talent that we've wanted. And I think it comes from authenticity. It comes from the energy, the culture, the growth. There's a lot of things today that's in our favor. And that's so important. We're going to be hiring 55 people in the next year. And so building pipeline of talent and then hiring the best people. We had one of our salesperson was at Nudge AI. When Nudge AI shut down, the founders put the list of all their employees on the web and on LinkedIn. And Michelle, who's now on our team, got approached by 268 companies that were asking to hire her, and she chose Tealbook. Like, that's huge. And so finding what makes your company so special is very important, because you're going to need talent. And as you grow, you need more talent. And it's very, very competitive out there. Then the last few points, just ask for feedback. If an investor pass, it's okay. You can't convince them all. Fundraising in this round was quite interesting because it felt like the Hunger Game. Typically you fly to San Francisco or New York, you've got time, you can send emails following up. But when you do this on Zoom, we could take 5 to 6 VC calls a day. And so, my team, which some of them were fairly new to fundraise, it was quite exhausting. And even for me, who have so much energy, it was like, I was on a Friday night, I had a VC call at 8 o'clock because they're on the West Coast time. And I was spent, like I was completely drained, because you have to be on, you have no idea where they're going to go. You're trying to convince them, that you've got this amazing, not convince them, but you're telling them about your amazing opportunity. And, anyway, so that was pretty draining. But I think what's important is to get feedback. And I tested the VC, the Series A in August with a couple of funds, got their feedback. And honestly, their feedback was just because we were not as prepared to raise. Like our data room didn't include our TAM and things that they got caught on that they shouldn't have. And that was great learning for us to understand, what we needed to do to go to Series A and have all these things already checked before we would give access to our data room. And so ask for feedback and listen. Most importantly, just pay attention. And then just your network, so important. Network. I know with COVID, it's a little harder, but reach out to investors, reach out to other founders, ask them for 15, 20 minutes of their time. We're all, pretty generous with our time just because we've been there and people have been generous with us. And the more we can give, and that's what, Kashan and Mo are doing right now with Ty, is just giving their time to the community. And so build your network. What I can say is that my first angel round I was, on a soccer field with my middle daughter who was playing soccer. And it was one of the moms next to me who had heard me give my business card to someone that was in manufacturing and heard me say that I own a tech company that could help, because they were selling to the enterprise and they had a lot of suppliers. So I was listening to you talk about your business. It sounds really interesting. Like you're always traveling. And then I said, well, I'm going to keep traveling even more because I'm fundraising now. And she asked me, what was I looking for? How much money? And she ended up being my first angel investor. So you never know where investment can come from. Today I was updating one of my first shareholder on the initial seed round. I pitched him. I was at SAS North in Ottawa, and I met him through someone. He picked me up at the conference. We went for a quick dinner, and then he dropped me off at the airport, and he gave me $150,000. So again, like just take on the opportunity. Another investor was at a coffee shop in New York. I decided to purposely leave my phone. I waited in line in a coffee shop just to get my head off of my phone and out of my hotel room. This guy started chatting. What do you do? I've got a tech company. What do you do? I'm an investor in tech. And he ended up participating in our last round. So again, investors come from so many different strange places. And what I've done in each round is brought in some very strategic angel investors. And those have added a ton of value. No matter the check size, they've been incredibly helpful with their network, with their support, their guidance, especially if they're coming with a lot of experience in your space. So what I've learned, don't rush to raise capital. Make sure that you raise capital at the right time. I think that's really important, to be honest with yourself. Use the capital where you can get the most value out of it. So your number one job is to create value for your shareholders. Always remember that. It's something sometimes we lose sight of. So just make sure that wherever you are putting dollars, you're going to get dollars back. And that's going to mean in a second milestone will put a price on your company, and you're going to be able to grow your business and your valuation. Investors, they put their money where they can trust the founder. And so build, very authentic relationship with investors. And the more people point, like all my investors, it's people that pointed to me. And so Michelle McBain is like 5 people said, oh, you should meet Michelle. And people were telling Michelle she should meet me. And then the same thing with my last round, Tim Schigel at Refinery Ventures. Quite a few people said, you heard Tealbook is coming to Cincinnati because we have an office there, and vice versa. And in this round, it was like 4 different people, investors, founders, early shareholders, that all pointed at Jules. And then he was getting really excited about the business, and he got very bullish. He put a term sheet in front of everybody else. Not all feedback is good, so do listen to feedback, but just be very selective. Some feedback sometimes is just not applicable, and that's okay. Be humble, but have very thick skin, because you're going to get some feedback you don't want to hear. Focus on the best possible team. I can't reiterate how important to hire smart people. Take care of your early customers. For some reason, I just got convinced by one of my early executives that customer success was not important. It was going to be a distraction, and it couldn't have not been further from the truth. If you can have your early customers become your biggest champion, it will be just a referral channel for you. So invest early in customer success. Don't do that mistake. Stay connected to your shareholders. Even my early stage investors, I did quarterly updates, and then network with other founders. Again, I'm probably repeating myself. So I'm going to pause because I want to make sure I leave enough time, and we only have 10 minutes for question. And I'm seeing that there's a lot of questions that were posted. I don't know if I can see the questions.
So thank you so much, Stephany, for your experience. I can read the questions out loud just to save time. So the first one is, when you say women need to adapt, do you have any tips? I like how you say women have a different style. I find that it's often described as emotional. Do you have any thoughts about this?
No, I remember when I hired Matt. So Matt is our the.
In the interest of
Yeah, go ahead.
I think his internet kind of lagged.
Okay, so I'll answer the question when he comes back. Well, okay. I would say that it's a style. So when I hired Matt, he came in, and within a week of being at Tealbook, he talked to an investor and he pitched them, and I was like, it sounded amazing, and I don't know if it's gender specific, but he really pitched it. Like, he pitched it, and it was such a bigger idea. It's the same idea, but it's the way he pitched it. And I've read recently, they did this study where they did the same pitch. They rehearsed with a female voice and a man voice, and the stats were so incredibly different, and on asking investors if they were going to invest in that company or not. And so I think there is a style. I think that you have to be a little bit more direct. We tend to answer questions by taking too long. We tend to apologize. We tend to probably be sometimes too humble in some ways. And so I think you just have to be more direct, and that's something that you're going to learn over time, but just be aware of it is really important. And just pitch with guys. Like, if you've got guys on your team or your husband or friends, like, get to rehearse with someone where you can role play and then hear them out how they're going to do it. It's not that we have to become man, but there's a different style that you have to adjust to that I had to learn. But mostly it's be direct, answer questions directly, and then explain if they want to know more. And then just be less humble. I know it's hard, but you're doing something pretty amazing, and investors should be flattered to put money in your business. Like, that's how you have to think. And that's something that was my biggest mindset change, is that I was not asking investors to believe in, I was asking investors to believe in me, and I needed capital to grow my company. And then as soon as I changed that to say, like, hey, you'd be fortunate to put money because this is an amazing opportunity, suddenly it changed. People, like, it's real that they don't want to miss out. So hopefully this helps.
Mm-hmm. All right, absolutely. So the next question is, how is investment thesis different from a business plan?
Oh, your business plan is, it's in your business plan, you'll have your strategy, you'll have all your different functions and your metrics. You're going to have your execution plan, your FTE plan. So it's much more on the strategy and the execution. Your investment thesis is, why should an investor put money in your company? So it's quite different. So, and you should always have your investment thesis kind of ready and there, but you shouldn't build your business plan based on the investment thesis. That's just a market trends that are showing that you're building something that's really big, and the market is showing that there's a massive opportunity there.
Okay. Next question is from Cal. I'm just going to read it out for you. Based on the experience that you mentioned, is it right to expect that a proper seed round won't really be possible unless we have employees more than just our founding team of 2?
No, you can raise a seed round with 2 employees. So again, it's every story is different, right? It depends on your business. It depends. Like I've met companies who raise money on a napkin. I've met companies who raised, we had this guy at a conference that we met that raised $38 million with Google and other funds, and took him 2 months. He had no product yet. Like everything's possible. Like, right. I'm giving you what my own experience has been is to go to a seed round. I needed to have, for me, was the technology. I didn't have the technology in house. And that's where you're building value. If I'm going to put money in your company, I want you to own the IP and the technology and have that person that's going to be able to build it. That was really important. And because I hadn't built a tech company before, have someone that's more operational, that understood how to scale, how to build a foundation that could scale, was also very important, something I didn't have. Like I had the market knowledge, I had the connection to customers in the industry. I knew how to solve the problem, but I needed the team that could give the confidence to an investor. And I remember that investor said, if you bring a CEO and a CTO, I'll give you $2 million more on your valuation. So it was significant enough that I went from 4 million to 6 million because I found a CTO and a CEO.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next question is from Natalia. How much revenue and traction did you have at each stage of fundraising, and how big was your team at each of the stages?
Oh God, I'd have to, it'd probably take a little too long to answer that. I think it's changed so much. Like Series A are a lot more demanding than they used to be. I think, I don't, again, it's going to be personal, but what the rule of thumb that I've heard, at least to go to Series A, you have to be at least 100,000 MRR. So monthly recurring revenue. That could be very broad too. But typically the VCs that want to see that you've got $1 million to $1.4 million. Some it's higher than that. And it's not because of the revenue so much as there's a real market when you're generating revenue, right? It's a proof point that people are willing to pay for it. They're willing to pay for it enough that it makes it, you can build a sustainable business. It's more of a sign of growth than anything else. And so every stage the VC will know. I mean, angel, no revenue, seed, whatever. Any revenue's amazing depending on your business. And Series A, typically you need to have, enough to show that traction.
Mm-hmm. So we have 3 questions that are similar. It's about how do you reimburse your first CTO, and how do you attract and hire your CTO when you don't have any funds?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. So I was fortunate that my CTO had done well at a company that just got acquired. And so he invested in the round. So that was a little different. And then out of the round, we did pay a salary, and then I give him, options. Not crazy, like it was not. And at the time, honestly, like if him and the CEO had asked for 50% of the company, I would probably have to give it to them, because I would have hit the wall. I would have not been able to survive. But luckily they didn't. And we agreed on options that felt fair for all of us. And so then I had to top him up to give him the incentive, because we had sort of figured out our way. And I want to make sure this is someone that is highly hireable anywhere else. And so I want him to feel like a co-founder. So I had to top up his option over time, but not right away. One of the rules that I found is that people that come in that ask for a lot of money up front are usually not the people that work out. for me, at least, it's sort of the people that are willing to come in and put a bet and trust that they can get it done, that I always end up rewarding a lot more. But as my husband would say, like, you can't take toothpaste back into the tube once it's out. So one of my lessons is that don't give too much too fast to people. Let them grow into their value. Give them something that they can accomplish, and then you can give them incentive as they're hitting some of those milestones. But that's something I've learned. So I always go a little bit under. I always pay a little under at the beginning, but I hit the 3 months, 6 months. We define what that looks like and how we top up with salary or options as they grow value. But I think it kind of shows people, it gets them ramp up faster and gets them, they're there for the right reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So next question is from Sebastian. we are at the end of our first raise, pre-revenue, designing and building our MVP. It has been a very long journey for us too. Okay, 2 questions. After this development phase, we're going to the market. How would you determine when to raise next time?
So, and I'm saying this like with like, I've had times where I almost said like I had to have someone bridging a month to get the capital and to get to, you know, so I've definitely cut it close at time, which I'd never want to do again because it's the most nauseating feeling. So any time that you can raise when you don't have to raise, which sounds like amazing, but it really makes a big difference. Like for us, if I had waited in Q2 2021, we would have had a 5 to 6 months window to raise, as now I have almost a year in front of me. And it feels really good. We're going to put more money when we still have money in the bank. So it allowed me to be more selective and a little bit, I wouldn't say cocky, like as one of my board members says, be cute without be confident without being too cute, because we didn't have to take the money. And that's the best possible scenario. If you're not in that position, don't look desperate. Super important. You have to be, you know, when you sell to investors, like this is it. Like we've done all these things. The market is now about to catch up, or we have early signs with our customers. We need to put more capital now, and why us? And it's again, you're selling your idea against thousands of other companies that are looking for capital. And so you really have to excite them about what you're doing and convince them that if they're putting money in your company, they're going to get a return of, you know, ideally 10, depending on what they're looking for. That's something important to know also with your investors.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's 5 o'clock right now. Just wondering if you can stay on for 5 more minutes so we can get to the other questions, or if not, that's fine.
No, I'm fine. I can stay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the next question is, does the angel seed round require a data room in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Angel, you're going to still need to do some diligence. Like if they're a smart angel, they're not just going to give you a check, and it's possible, it's happened to me, but it's usually they want to have some diligence. Seed, if you have institutional investors, absolutely. And so, and there's a ton of blogs on how to build a good data room, what you need to put in the data room. Even on this round, we did all of the data room like so nice and comprehensive, but we almost gave too much. And so then it starts spiraling questions. Suddenly we're just answering questions. And so in hindsight, we would have done a data room first where it had like the basic information about them being excited. And if they were really interested, then they would ask us for the next data room. Or you give them that first data room, and then once you get a term sheet, then you give them access to the full data room. Hopefully you have a law firm that's working with you, and they should be able to tell you what goes in the data room. But it's all the diligence stuff, like your customer contract, your employment contracts. But we put everything. We put interviews with customers. We put all the analyst reviews and things like that. So they really had all the material that they needed. Plus we build the investment thesis. Of course, they were going to tweak it and do their own, but at least it give them something to work with that they didn't have to recreate it from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The last question, how do you manage the dilution? Do you set a certain amount of equity aside for your future investors and subsequently communicate that to all previous equity owners? Also, how did you divide up the equity between you having the idea and your technical co-founder?
So the rule of thumb is that every round you shouldn't dilute more than 25%. 30% would be on the high end. 20%, like we did 18% on this round. It's very rare. That's just, again, because we were in a good position. And then we also issued some options. So we ended up diluting more because we issued 7% options. So altogether it was 25%, but we didn't give 25% in investors plus the options. So that's a good rule of thumb, is that you shouldn't give more than that on each round. And hopefully every round you're increasing the value. So even though you get diluted, the value of your shares is much bigger. I'm a little different because I had 2 years under my belt before Jeff joined. So I had sort of the luxury in a way to give out the options, but I wanted to be motivated. So, but he's not a founder. So, you know, it's something you kind of, I think you can learn, you know, your cap table, you know, the type of options that you have, you know, what your forecast and how many people you're going to hire. You have to make a decision. For us, every employee is a shareholder. We give option, even if it's 1,000 options, we give options to all of our employees. We want them to all be super excited about creating value for themselves and the company. So then you can manage how you're going to give options that way a little easier if you know you're going to hire 15 people and approximately, but there's a lot of data out there you can find. And sometimes we had to give options to someone that we really, really want. We probably gave more options that we would have for that role. It's just because in order to attract them from another company or make it worth their while, or, you know, motivate them to be, you know, not distracted and feel like they really had ownership, we gave more. But it's, again, it's very personal based on your cap table. But if you start with 10%, I think 10% to 15% an option, it's usually a good place to start. But just one thing to always keep in mind is, and I think we forget that, we think it's cheaper to give options to people because you don't have capital, but it's the most expensive currency you have. And so, you know, being very protective of your options. We do a 1-year cliff, so no one gets vested before a year that they're at Tealbook, and then it vests monthly over 4 years. And we've been very strict about that everybody that has options in the company that can retain option are there for the long haul. But just don't give option just because it feels like you don't have other option. Like if you can pay cash for anything, pay cash, and then give the options to the right people. But if you have a year and they leave, they don't work out, they don't take options, right? So you can get those options back and put them back on the option pool.
We have tons of questions, but we don't have enough time to really handle them. So everyone, please be assured we would set up a mentoring session where you would have an opportunity to ask these questions one-on-one with experts who have done this fundraise. And we would certainly be able to help you. We would have to let Steph go. Thank you so much, Stephany, for this. This is really, really valuable. And it's been super engaged session, and all the best.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And the recording of this session and this deck will be available. Keep an eye on the email. Also keep an eye on the announcement.